We're seeing a growing strain on U.S. leadership within NATO, particularly when it comes to managing escalation risks and avoiding wider conflicts. That raises questions about whether the alliance structure is still effectively aligned with its original stabilizing role. Is this difficulty in staying out of wars a structural issue inside NATO leadership, or a reflection of broader shifts in how the U.S. approaches global security commitments?
This stuff is coming home, too. It's coming home to the United States. You can't fight wars overseas, basically, without some of the violence and some of the attitudes that are developed in wars like this coming home. And I keep telling people, this is a country that has not had bombs dropped in its front yard since 1865. And, we had 12 million men or 16 million men, depending on how you count them, in World War II. They were overseas. There was nothing on our soil of consequence. A few firebombs floated over by the Japanese to the Pacific coast, a little bit of action in the Aleutians, which stopped very quickly when we took action against it. And there was a little on the East Coast with a few Nazi spies and this, that, and the other thing. But no American in 3 or 4 generations has had bombs in his front yard. None. We just don't know what it's like to be in a place like Ukraine, or in a place like Gaza, or in a place like the West Bank, or a place like Lebanon. We simply do not know. We fought all our wars at arm's length. What kind of thing is going to happen to the empire when it comes here? And it might come here for domestic reasons, not necessarily some foreign power attacking us. That could happen. It certainly could happen with a dirty bomb or something like that coming across one of our borders. But that would be the excuse for the invocation of the Insurrection Act, the declaration of martial law, and we'd be off to the races, because I think that's what the domestic agenda of this administration is, led by none other than your favorite Secretary of War, he whom Trump likes to hold up as a movie star image of a killer, Pete Hegseth.
There does seem to be a broader sense, even among some establishment voices, that the U.S. system is facing signs of overextension, not just militarily, but across multiple fronts simultaneously: Ukraine, Iran, China, and other regional pressure points. While the military dimension is most visible, the strain also shows up in coordination, resources, and the ability to sustain multiple long-term strategic commitments at once. Beyond the military aspect, where do you see the most significant structural erosion of U.S. influence happening right now? Financially, diplomatically, or in its ability to coordinate a coherent global strategy?
I think an article that appeared in a publication put out by Win Without War, I believe it was. I think I've got the author's name. Yeah, Nicholas Davies. The title of the article is very pertinent, and the article itself is eloquent. The title is, "Do U.S. War Crimes Doom the World to Endless War and Chaos?" And the answer to that question, I think, is absolutely. And that's what's happening. We are destroying international law. We are destroying everything that we built up after World War II, that Franklin Roosevelt talked about at Yalta, that Eisenhower was very instrumental in helping to build, that Harry Truman was 100% behind, that the United States became the real look to, if not the actual, and in many cases we were the actual power behind that law. If Mao was right that international law comes out of the barrel of a gun, and I think to an extent he was, that gun was owned by the power that had dramatically supplied all of the United Nations, and that's the term we used at the time, not allies. We call them the United Nations. Eisenhower used that term. Marshall used that term. We supplied all of those powers that wound up being, quote, victorious, unquote, on our side. They were prostrate at the end of it, most of them. Britain certainly was. The Soviet Union was. France was. Japan, an enemy, was. We were the titan in the world, and we put the titan's weight on the Security Council, often thwarted by others, mostly Russia when it was in their interest to do so. but we were the titan behind international law. We were the law. However imperfect that was, there was law. Now, as that title implies in Davies' article, and I think he's right, we have destroyed it. Not only have we destroyed it, we have had a president who impugned it, a president who disregards it. His mind is more important than the law. James Madison is spinning in his grave. If men were angels, they wouldn't need governments, they wouldn't need laws. Well, we destroyed international law, and we are working hard to destroy U.S. law, constitutional and otherwise. What goes on overseas comes home. That's almost an axiom of our wars. And we have been at war for the past 30 years, if you count them off, and all the people we've destroyed, hurt, put into either internal displacement or external displacement or killed. 38 million is one analysis of how many people we have killed with our sanctions, 50% or more of which were women and children since 9/11. 38 million people. That rivals Mao Zedong in the Cultural Revolution. That rivals Stalin in the purges, in the deepest, darkest hours of the purges. It even rivals Hitler, really, when you talk about the people he personally or his Wehrmacht and other forces killed. 100 million total, but probably somewhere between 30 and 40 at Hitler's door personally. So we are the rival of those people and the people that we have killed with our sanctions since 9/11. We are no longer the arbiter of international law, good or bad. We are no longer the world's protector, good or bad. And I would argue that for a long time, there was more good to it than bad. Now we are just all bad. We are all evil. And we sponsor people who are even more evil than we, like Israel.
The discussion points to a situation in which the scale and visibility of destruction in multiple theaters, from Lebanon to broader regional conflicts, are increasingly difficult to frame or minimize in traditional Cold War narratives, especially as more information enters the public domain outside mainstream channels. How do you assess the broader geopolitical and reputational impact of these developments on Israel's position internationally? And does this level of exposure change anything in terms of how the conflict is politically sustained or justified?
Well, I take Lindsey Graham to heart when he says that if they weren't doing it, we'd have to be there doing it. And were the forces doing it for us composed of Lindsey Grahams, I have no doubt that if they could overcome their cowardice, they would be doing that. And that's one point you've got to make about these people. I mean, I'm sorry. These are not the most courageous, bravest warriors in the world who make it their practice on a daily basis to kill men, women, and children. Now, I will admit in Iraq, in Somalia, in Afghanistan, in Libya, and elsewhere, we were responsible directly or indirectly for a lot of women and children being killed. But I don't think we ever walked out on a battlefield with a Marine or a soldier or a sailor or an airman whose purpose in life, there may have been some aberrations, there always are, but at large, purpose in life was killing women and children. These people's purpose in life is killing women and children because they will tell you they have the wombs or the potential to grow up, and they will be terrorists or they will produce terrorists. That's the kind of language I hear out of these people. They remind me of some of the neoconservatives in this country who would say the same thing for the top page of the New York Times, right side above the fold, if they could get away with it and maintain their jobs, because that's the way they feel. Kill them all, slaughter them all, as my lieutenant in George Washington University seminar told me about his 2 years in the IDF and his time in Operation Cast Lead, which was a couple, 3 weeks of preparation for what you're seeing post October the 7th in Gaza. Always planned to be done eventually on October the 7th, whatever its inception was. October the 7th, like 9/11 for us, gave the Israelis the excuse to go out and put Operation Cast Lead into play across the whole breadth of Gaza. That's what they're doing, and they've been planning it for a long time, and they are bloody-minded about completing it. Naftali Bennett, what has Naftali Bennett been accusing Netanyahu of? Not finishing off the Palestinians in Gaza. not finishing off Hamas. Go down in those tunnels and kill Hamas, get them out of those tunnels, kill them. And Bibi and the IDF, and I don't blame them, are content to stay up above ground and kill them piecemeal during a ceasefire and belie any kind of humanitarian aid, really, that could get in there and help. Even got cheating going on right now with Israelis and Palestinians making money off the cheating. That'll always happen. But humanitarian assistance in there now is sort of a joke amongst the relief agencies that really know how to do it and know what's going on there. So this is just terrible, all the way from East Jerusalem, across Gaza, the West Bank, into Lebanon. He'd be in Syria if he had enough troops to take that on at the same time, too. He's only got a holding force in Syria, and then Iran. And I'm sure Bibi would tell Trump that at any moment that Trump wants to march ground forces into Iran, he'll put the IDF, turn it around from Lebanon, put it on hold in Lebanon, and go on and join him with the ground forces in Iran. I almost wish he would, because they get swallowed up and murdered. I hate to say that, but it would probably be the end of the IDF. But that's whom we're dealing with. And now I'm trying to figure out, have I been right that Israel has all along been our tool? Or are other people right that we're their tool? I think the two have had moments where each was operative, and now they've merged. It doesn't really matter, because we're both criminal.
It's a pretty stark framing, where the argument is that the dynamics in West Asia are no longer isolated, but are feeding into a wider global shift in perception and power, especially since October 7th and the subsequent escalation cycles. The sense is that the traditional ability of the US and Israel to shape the narrative is increasingly under strain, even as the conflict itself expands and intensifies. Are we actually witnessing a structural shift in global perception and power balance, or is this still an early phase of a longer process where the old system is simply adapting to regain control?
Well, I don't for a moment attribute the same kind of almost evil genius to Donald Trump that I would to Bibi Netanyahu. I mean, you don't stay in power as long as he stayed in power in a volatile Jewish state like Israel. And I say that with emphasis on the Jewish, because I don't think the Arabs really have much say in it. And of course, there are more Arab Palestinians plus Christians and others in Israel than there are Jews by a slight amount. I suspect it's more than 1 million now, because I think 1 million Jews have left. They voted with their feet, and I don't think they're coming back. But I think what we're looking at now is a situation where the United States is so locked in this, and we're led by a person who really does not understand, except for the pecuniary aspects of it, where he and his family are making tons and tons of money. I don't know if you saw that story this morning. This is sort of an aside, but it's indicative about the $40 million in gold and Rolex watches and other things that they found in this CIA agent's home. And now the agency is saying that, there were some circumstances in hiring him that weren't copacetic. And all. I mean, you can't make this up. You know where he got that? He got that in Ukraine. And as I told my daughter this morning, you could go to Ukraine as a CIA operative, and if you really had sticky fingers, you could pick up $40 million in gold overnight, virtually, and walk out with it. I'm the man who saw $16 billion go on pallets on a C-130 and get shipped to Iraq and disappear. $16 billion. So there's more money lying around in Ukraine you could shake a stick at, but it's indicative of what you and I are talking about, the corruption of all of these wars and the corruption associated with European and American support for Ukraine and Zelensky in particular, and what's happening in Israel and Lebanon and elsewhere, and what's happening in Georgia. We must not leave that out. They're still trying to overthrow that government. And what's happening adjacent to Kaliningrad and in the Baltic in general and on up to the Arctic. We are painting a tapestry that the Chinese and others in the world who are about to meet in India in September with the BRICS meeting, Modi in charge, they can't figure out, I don't think. But they know they're winning, and they don't want to do anything to disturb that victory. So you have the kind of advice coming out of Xi Jinping, I suspect, that goes something like this. If you can damage them, but don't damage them in such a way that it reflects back on us or causes them to respond against us. which is why Xi told a whole bunch of lies to Trump with regard to support for Iran. Of course, he's supporting Iran. Is he doing it through third countries? Well, how else would you do it and get away from, the patrols and so forth? And is he doing it with overhead satellites? Well, probably so. And is Russia doing it? Well, probably so. Are they doing things because they feel like they have to protect Iran? Yeah, to a certain extent, but mostly it boils down to protecting their own interests, particularly China's interests with regard to the railroad to Iran and so forth. So we're up against them in Ukraine. We're up against them in Iran. We're up against them largely everywhere we go. Were we to try and take Cuba, I bet you we would probably be up against them there, one or both of them. I hope we don't do that. So why are we doing this? This is a huge question. Why are we doing this? Is it just to make money for Trump's family and Trump himself? Is that the only reason we're destroying the domestic environment of this country, destroying international law, waging war and killing people for no purpose whatsoever except money? I can't figure it out. I can't say that enough. People don't like that as an answer, but I'm sorry. This is, in many ways, that old word ineluctable. You can't figure out what's happening because it is so base. B-A-S-E, base, as in depraved, as in broken, as in nonsensical, illogical, except that a lot of people are making money.
It does seem like there's a broader argument being made that traditional markers of full-spectrum dominance are increasingly harder to demonstrate in practice, especially when strategic choke points or regional outcomes appear less controllable than in earlier periods of U.S. power projection. At the same time, there's a perception that financial systems and economic leverage are becoming more central tools of influence than direct military outcomes. Are we actually seeing a structural shift where economic power overtakes military dominance in shaping global outcomes? Or is this more of a transitional phase in how imperial power is being exercised under new constraints like nuclear deterrence?
Yeah, that's the one that scares me, is the nuclear weapons. No treaties and 10,000 or more between us and Russia. That's a hell of a lot of nuclear, enough to destroy the world several times over. And the other thing that truly troubles me, and I can't emphasize this enough, is the profoundly inept leadership we have right now. You can say it's superb in grifting, superb in manipulating the stock market for money, superb in using the taxpayers' dollars for its own purposes, either personal or what it calls national purposes, what the Congress is becoming, even in the Republican part, more and more skeptical of, particularly these things like this 1.6 or whatever $billion fund to pay back all the people who participated in January the 6th, which got even Thune, the majority leader in the Senate, up on his back legs. But all of that is going on right now, and there seems to be no counterpunch. There seems to be no effort that is meaningful to right the ship of state, to use a metaphor. I'm not sure it can be righted, but I don't see anybody actually trying to do it. And that's extremely worrisome. And then you come back to what you pointed out, you come back to the nuclear weapons and the desperation we're going to feel at one point here, probably not too far into the future, maybe even in my lifetime. This desperation is going to be so deep and so all-encompassing that we're going to start something that we can only finish with nuclear weapons.